Welcome back to the Late Night Madness on W Fool Radio. You tune into the only show where chaos comes complimentary. The only duo brave enough to talk nonsense with conviction. Ladies and gentlemen, Shabba, Kate, two talking fools. Shabba.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It's Kate from the Two Talking Fools podcast. Good morning. Good morning. Coming to you this Friday morning, doing another solo podcast. Shaba and I should be in the studio together tonight. So we'll have new content coming for you soon. I hope you guys had a good week. It seems like this one, it really flew by. For us up here in New England, it's gotten a little bit warmer. It's warmed up a hair, so that's a good thing. It was awfully cold there for a while. And it's noticeable that the days are getting a little bit longer and the sun is staying out a little bit longer for us that have seasonal depression issues. You might even be feeling a little bit better. You might be feeling the effects of having a little bit of a longer day after day. And we're at spring. We're so close. So hang in there. I know it's been a long winter. It really has. And I think the worst of it's really been the cold. But anyways, I'm in my remote studio here at my house, and I wanted to bring to the podcast something that I haven't really even talked to Shaba about. But lately I've been going down some serious Reddit rabbit holes, and I blame TikTok for this. These are the kind that you look up in the air and you realize hours have passed and you're now totally emotionally invested in a complete stranger's nightmares. And out of all the deep dives that I've done recently, this one that I want to talk to you about this morning, it really is unsettling to me, and I think it's just the mystery. Appalachia, not just a mountain range, not just a region, is a place wrapped in history, isolation, folklore, and stories that have whispered throughout the generations. Appalachia stretches across a large portion of the eastern United States, and it runs from New York all the way down to Alabama. It's something like, I think, 17 states. It's home to some of the oldest mountains on Earth, landscapes that have existed far longer than modern civilization, and maybe that's the part that feels so eerie, or why it feels so eerie. For centuries, people have lived deep in these mountains, often miles from the nearest neighbor. Isolation wasn't a vibe, it was survival. And in places like that, stories weren't just entertainment. They were warnings, explanations, rules. Don't whistle at night. Don't answer voices in the woods. If something calls your name, no, it didn't. Across generations, Appalachian folklore has been filled with tales of strange sounds, shadowy figures, things moving in the tree lines, and encounters that never quite made sense. Some stories speak of creatures, others speak of something far subtler, the feeling of being watched, followed, or not alone. And what makes it even more fascinating, modern stories still echo the same themes. Today, people are still talking about stories that have happened to them in modern time. Which brings us here today. And because sometimes I feel like the things that capture my attention or that I talk about, I annoy my friends. Shaba's probably tired of hearing about all this stuff all the time. So I have you guys, and that's why I'm doing it. So tonight I'm going to share with you some stories that I've seen on Reddit that have really stuck with me, the ones that have made me pause and maybe glance over my shoulder once or twice. So get comfortable and let's head into the mountains. And I should also preface this too. If you have any scary stories or stories like this or something interesting and you want to send it like anonymously, you want us to read it on air, but you don't want to be included, you just let us know. But you can email us at twotalkingfools@gmail.com. Send it our way. And that's how I kind of got on this topic, is there is a TikToker. She takes scary stories like anonymously. People send them into her, and I think she does research on some. And then she tells the stories on TikTok. And lately she's been doing a few on Appalachia. And then I searched it one day in TikTok about different stories. And I'm like, you know what? I want to do a Reddit deep dive. So I'm going to let my dark, deep voice take the next few minutes to read some of these stories that I pulled from Reddit. And then I would love, at the end, obviously, you could comment on all our social media stuff. I want to know what you think. And if you know of a story from Appalachia, I want you to email me. This one from Reddit is titled, I lived in the heart of Appalachia, and this is easily the most terrifying story of one of my experiences. The story may be short or it may be drawn out. I am recounting these events as I type, as it was honestly one of the most horrifying things I have experienced, and it brings me genuine stress to think about it. This happened maybe 2 to 3 years ago. I live in southern West Virginia and have my entire life. The woods and mountains surround every direction you look, and nighttime is a darkness that you can never dream of unless experienced. I was with a friend. I'll call him Mark. Mark was at my house one evening doing the usual things, watching UFC, playing Xbox, etc. It was extremely late when we finally got bored and decided to go for a walk on a nearby trail to smoke a joint. This is not a particularly long trail, but it is very dense in the woods that surround it, and it is easy to get freaked out when thinking about your surroundings. We finally get to about halfway into the trail, about 30 minutes in, where we stop, pack our joint, and stand on the trail to chill and talk. The forest is very alive tonight. There are always noises in the woods, but the amount of animal activity for the time was unsettling. At this point, it was probably past 1 a.m. This was strange and kind of eerie, but not alerting, as any sort of predatory animal in the area may cause a disturbance. We finished smoking and continued our walk when almost immediately the forest falls dead quiet. And as soon as the forest goes quiet, there is a voice. It almost sounds like a mocking, humanoid voice, shaky and uncertain, almost like an old children's toy, like the ones with the crackly speakers and the robotic voice, if you know what I mean. This immediately sets us off. We bolt directly down the opposite length of the trail, but the sound does not gain distance. It doesn't get closer per se, but no matter how far we ran down the trail, this eerie voice remains the same volume, going over and over with no quieting or stopping. At this point, I am convinced that we are in genuine danger, something I have felt very few times. Finally, after sprinting for who knows how long, we exit the trail, grasping for breath and almost at the verge of tears of how frightening this was. We begin to exit the trail, and about 5 minutes from the exit, there is a bone-shaking, heart-stopping, murderous scream from directly behind us. I know what a mountain lion sounds like. This was not an animal. This was not someone playing or watching a movie. This scream sent birds flying from nests and made my heart drop into my stomach. It was the most genuinely depraved and violent scream that I have ever heard. This is a true story, and I have only told maybe 3 people, all of whom seem to brush it off as false. I've never been a person to push for the existence of the paranormal or spiritual, but I genuinely believe I have encountered something inhuman in those woods. Now there's an edit. I know I will receive questions such as what the voice was possibly saying, or to explain the area, and what happened after. I genuinely cannot remember what the voice was saying, if anything intelligible. I don't know if I could understand it then, and I certainly can't recall understanding it after several years of blocking it out of my memory. All that I recall is that it was a fluctuating voice in pitch, shaking, almost just joining sounds together. After running from the scream at the end of the trail, we ran to the car, which was only about 5 more minutes away from the trail, so we got there relatively fast from sprinting. Story number 2. And actually, to clarify, story number 2 is to reply to this story here. Oh, wow, I feel this in my bones. My uncle, my mom's brother, has had a farm in southeast West Virginia since the 70s, long before I came into this world. Mom is the oldest of 5, and my uncle built a bunch of houses on the farm so family could use it whenever. Some lived there, and others, like my family, visited often. My mom and older sister and I would go for weeks on end to spend time with family, and I always loved it because I have a ton of cousins and was the baby for a long time, so mostly I tagged along with my cousins and felt extremely safe, like it was my happy place. I don't really remember anything totally out of the ordinary when I was really little, other than I remember an imaginary friend whom I exclusively played with at the farm. Nowhere else. And we moved extensively for Dad's job, so I've lived in many different places. What I remember after age 5 was suddenly being old enough to not have to have someone walk me to and from other houses, which I thought was so cool. So I used to explore. My uncles liked to bow hunt and had taken me a few times not too far from into the woods. So I was able to go back on my own and find their little tree platforms they had built to hunt from. I thought they were cool little tree houses. Your story sounds a lot like the very last time I ever took off by myself in the woods without any other family member with me. It was the winter. I wanted to be out in the snow and explore. So I found my way up the mountain. That is what I called it, but in fact, it was probably just a massive hill and into the trees. I couldn't find a spot I was looking for and got pretty frustrated with my 8-year-old self. So I sat down by a creek to catch my breath and figure out where I was. I couldn't have been sitting more than about 3 minutes when something let out a scream I can only describe as blood-curdling. I thought it was a fox, most likely, until I heard another voice crying, just weeping and wailing, and the sorrow was palpable. My cousins had always told scary stories about Appalachia, and I figured that they had followed me into the woods and were trying to scare the pants off me for shits and giggles. I called out like, "Okay, guys, not funny. Okay, I'm going home. Enough." And I followed my footprints in the snow as fast as I could back to the farm. The screaming and crying didn't stop, stayed consistent as I moved, which really made me convinced it had been my cousins. I don't think I heard words, just crying and screaming, but it wasn't pleasant. I made my way back to the main house, my uncle's house, which was the biggest on the property and visible from the edge of the woods, and absolutely booked it, ran full tilt to get to the kitchen door. I remember getting through the door and slamming it behind me because I was a combo of terrified and annoyed that my cousins were playing a prank on me. The next closest cousin in age is 9 years older than me, and so I was often the butt of pranks. Well, wouldn't you know that every family member was accounted for in the living room and kitchen? The older male cousins and my uncles were in the kitchen putting their snow boots and coats on to come look for me. I had apparently been gone for several hours, and they were worried. According to my mom, I was white-faced. My hands were covered in scratches through my mittens. I guess I must have fallen or something. They were so worried I had disappeared. I should add, I set off from my aunt's to walk to my uncle's and had decided to take a detour and didn't tell anyone. Oops. I was 8 and really didn't think about how that might be bad. Mom said I looked like I had seen a ghost. I asked if anyone had come out to the woods to look for me. They said, "No, we've been looking at the different houses and we're just about to come look for you," because they saw my footprints head into the woods. I told them about where I went and what I heard, and my uncle, whose property it was, said, "Shit, I think you probably ran into the witch." I'm over here thinking, oh, some crazy lady lives in the woods and I probably stumbled near her cottage. No, the witch was just what they called the unknown entity that roamed the woods, screaming, crying, mimicking people's voices, and just giving people a good old sense of doom and dread. Not one had a straight answer about possible folklore or anything like that, but all my older cousins had their own experiences with similar happenings over the years. Scared the living daylights out of me. And while I've been back to the farm over the years, I can tell you I have never once set foot near the woods tree line. Even as an adult, I was grateful my family didn't think I was crazy, but they said a general rule is not to be in the woods alone. So I listened. To my knowledge, nothing physical ever happened with anyone and this entity, more of a prankster than anything. But whoa, the Appalachia has some wild stuff. I definitely remember some strange stuff happening during the week we had my aunt's funeral when I was 21, and random voices and red eyes or smoke apparitions on the wood's edge. But I never went to check them out after that one incident. And here's an edit. I should add that 100% of the family that was at the farm that trip was accounted for at my uncle's house getting ready to come look for me. So if it was anything other than something supernatural, it was not from anyone staying at the farm. I'll tell you what. These stories here, they're scaring me so bad. I shouldn't be reading these alone because I'm going to have to call somebody when I'm getting ready. I have another story for you. And this one's titled, I had a terrifying encounter in the Appalachian Mountains and I'm looking for answers. Excuse me. Let me start by saying I have lived in the Appalachian Mountains all my life and have experienced a lot of strange things. My family was Irish and settled in West Virginia, but I currently live in the North Carolina portion of these wonderful mountains. That being said, I have learned a lot about what really lurks in these dark woods, but this was like nothing I had experienced before. It all began with my golden retriever, Ozzy, growling like I have never heard before. He literally never growls, so that had me already uncomfortable, but this growl was bone-chilling. It was like he was getting ready to have to fight for his life or something. I took both him and my other dog out around 11 p.m., and he would not leave my side. I noticed that my workshop door was open, so I walked down to close it and lock it up the entire time he was glued to my side. Ozzy also kept trying to get in between my legs, still growling and all of his hair sticking straight up like a real feral animal. The second I closed the door, all hell breaks loose in the woods. It sounded like 50 full-grown men had broken out into a full sprint, tearing through the woods. Trees were shaking and branches falling. In my life, I have never been that scared. We got back into the house before I shit my pants, and I got my pistol maglite to figure out what the hell was out there. When the dog and I got back outside, we were surrounded by what sounded like people mumbling. It was everywhere. I shined the light all over the woods and couldn't see anything, but the sound was coming from all around. It sounded as if you got a full gym of people to baby mumble. You could almost make out the words. That's why I don't think it was an animal. I almost immediately felt sick, and I was having a mixture between a panic attack and the full swing of the flu. Back inside the house, it sounded like people were walking around all night. The windows were creaking, and you could clearly hear the sound of shoes on gravel. The mumbling never stopped. Every time I got up to check the house, my feet would touch the floor, and it would get dead silent. You couldn't hear you couldn't hear birds, crickets, frogs, or anything. I was terrified and didn't sleep a wink. The air felt thick and evil all night. That's the only way I could explain the feeling. Imagine a soaking wet quilt being tossed over you. That's how I felt. I am looking for any answers as to what this could be. This wasn't like the normal spooky stories my grandma and great uncles used to tell me. Phew, I got one more for you. I got two more for you. Oh no, I got three more for you. Next one, 3 years ago. I'll make a shorter story from a longer one involving sensitive auras. But once I was with a girl on Big Frog Mountain at dusk, miles away from anyone. We decided to walk up a trail when right behind the car, I stepped in mud puddle with odd-looking light brownish water. I pointed the unusual color to her. Then we started walking. Not far up the trail, she started getting scared and we went back to the car. In the car, we started making out while lying in the front seat and she had her hand draped out the window. I felt an odd sensation in my back. It had happened before when people were behind me and told her to pull her hand in, which she did. A few minutes later, I felt a sensation on my back again, but it felt more urgent. I rolled her window up, but being a horny-ass teenager, continued with the makeout session. A few minutes later, it felt like someone had stuck a live wire on my back. I sat up, started the car, and headed back down the mountain. She was obviously confused and asked me what was wrong. I replied that I didn't know, but something was wrong somewhere. We went back to my parents' house and was assured by them the family was okay. Having calmed down some, we ate a little dinner, then started to leave. After I opened the car door for her, I walked around the back of the car. While walking, I glanced at the back of the car and saw handprints the same color of the mysterious mud puddle on the car. The last one was over the back window, and it was obvious someone was watching us while inching their way to the front driver's side window. When I saw the handprints, it was like being hit with a lightning bolt, and I knew what had happened. Cold chills ran all over me. I got her out of the car, and as soon as she saw the prints, she knew it too. This story is the absolute truth, so help me, and I will never forget it. I'm not okay right now. Like, I do complain. We do complain about New England, and I know the Appalachia is beautiful, but this is scary for me. 1 year ago, this post might be dead. No, it's not. We're reading it right on the Two Talking Fools podcast. But maybe someone has shared a similar experience and is also hoping to find some sort of explanation. About 15 years ago, me and a few friends were playing some game. I think it was manhunt or ball tag, and the sun had just dipped over the horizon. It was that weird time where in an open area with nothing blocking the sky, you could see reasonably decent, but the woods were so dark. So playing a game where hiding is the main objective, me and one of my friends climbed a hill and dipped just into the shadows of the trees. We laid there in a sort of divot in the ground, heads peeking over the lip, watching our other friends search the area for us. We could easily see them all. Then out of nowhere, in the woods behind us, we hear this music. My buddy describes it as a marching band, but that doesn't really fit. It was like a steady drum beat, like you would hear at a Native American ceremony or celebration, and something that may have been singing or chanting. And I think the instrument is called a rain stick, with the subtle sound of a large group walking. And this is the part that confuses me. The most, if it was just what I previously mentioned, I could have explained it away with the history of the land and the tribes that once lived here. But there was one more instrument mixed in with this music that if I heard in any other setting would have been a beautiful melody. But given the setting and the harsh and unmistakable sound of a bagpipe, it got louder and louder. And then as suddenly as it started, it vanished. Terrified me and my friend, jumped up from our spot and bolted towards the safety of the yard that still had slight visibility. Our other friends who were standing and staring in our direction, the direction of the music, ran towards the house before we hit the ground. As we jumped the steepest 9 to 10 feet at the bottom of the hill, we spent the rest of the night talking in hushed whispers of our experience. I apologize for such a long post, but last night this memory came out of nowhere and kept me awake all night. If anybody has any idea what we might have been behind in this incident, what might have been behind this incident, or has had a similar experience, please let me know. So you guys, this little segment here, there are stories like this that just feel and sound the same way. Hundreds of stories about these crazy scenarios and incidences up in the Appalachia area. I could go on and on. We could do another deep dive. I'd love to know what you think. And I'd love to know if you know of anybody that lives in that area that also has stories. Of course, if you would like us to do a deep dive on anything, let us know. Email us at twotalkingfools@gmail.com. Otherwise, we will catch you on the next one. You can see what's up to date with the Two Talking Fools just by going to our website, and you can also follow us on social media.
Every topic like I'm breaking the tracks, laughing too hard, nearly dropped my seat. Shabba on the vibe, keep the chaos on beat. I'm the calm in the storm till the storm says nah. Then I'm laughing so hard I forget where we are. Got jokes on deck, got receipts on blast. I correct Shabba's nonsense, but we still talk fast from car ride.